my first 2 years in the FPV drone hobby, I only ever bought pre-built FPV drones. In fact, it wasn't until the beginning of 2023 that I finally decided to start building my own. And now that I've spent my fair share of time with both drone types, I've actually got some findings that I'm going to be sharing with you. So in today's video, I'm going to run you through which one's the better choice in terms of build quality, which one is the easiest to own, and then finally, which one you should pick if you're unsure of where to start. But first, if you're on a budget and you're thinking which one's cheaper, there's generally only one option for you to take. For example, if you went the route of buying a pre-build, you'd be purchasing equipment that has already been soldered together, tuned up, and tested to make sure it's a complete and functioning drone. If, however, you decide to go and build them for yourself, you'll be sourcing the individual parts and then putting the time and effort into building it all from the ground up. Generally speaking, the actual FPV drone parts themselves are all going to be similarly priced, so if you were to buy a pre-built FPV drone for $400 and then later try and build the exact same drone yourself, buying all the parts separately and all, you're going to find out that the DIY build comes out significantly cheaper. What's happening here is because you don't have to build it and instead somebody else's, you're paying for their time and skills. So unless your time is super valuable to you and you can justify the additional cash for the same spec drone as a pre-build, then buying all the parts yourself and putting the work in is going to be the cheapest entry in here. A side note to keep in mind though is that if you don't have the necessary tools like a soldering iron or even screwdrivers that are essential for a build, then there is actually a chance that buying a pre-built FPV drone might be the cheaper option initially for you. What's not going to be cheap though is if the build quality sucks and you end up spending more time trying to fix up mistakes or repair broken parts. First, we have the build quality in relation to the pre-builds. There have been a few occurrences where FPV drone manufacturers put out FPV drones that are pre-built for sale that are just really not worth your time or your money. Whether this be because the design is terrible, the electronics are outdated, or just simply if the manufacturer has a bad reputation and doesn't solder things together properly, whatever it is, it's a bad trap for beginners to fall into. Thankfully, there are a few things you can do while researching to find out if you're about to fall into a trap or not. Let's take this here as an example from the good side. This is my iFlight Nazgul Evoke pre-build. I bought it over 2 years ago now and have raved about it pretty much non-stop. Why? Because it's possibly the best drone I have in my entire 12 drone collection. It's gained its title to me by taking on hundreds of crashes without breaking a thing, recovering from a complete underwater submersion, and never having any issues in regard to electronic failures until super recently when the flight controller finally decided to give in. And honestly, fair play to it, especially after the underwater mission. I reckon that probably played a big part in the situation. Anyway, my point here is that this pre-built FPV drone is an amazing quality drone, both externally and internally, making it a great value for money purchase that honestly couldn't have left me any happier. I bought it because I'd seen so many other FPV YouTubers recommend it, and after reading about it online, I decided to pull the plug and send it. On the flip side to this though, we can take a look at the original DJI FPV drone. There are going to be a few people who tell you this is an amazing drone, and sadly, they usually don't know much better, so to them, it truly is. The issue here is that when you compare the cost of a drone like the DJI FPV with the iFlight Nazgul, it's probably one of the worst drones you could buy for the price. It's proven to not be durable in crashes, it's super underpowered for its weight, and main repairs can't be made by yourself, so you have to send it to DJI, which then costs a whole lot more than what it's actually worth. Both options are pre-builds, and they both offer similar convenience factors for getting started, but it all boils down to the factor of who you buy your pre-builds from and also the research that you do beforehand to make sure you end up with the best quality possible. Then, however, we have build quality in relation to a DIY build. If you've previously been into soldering and building electronics, then this might very well be a super easy factor to just forget about. However, if you're anything like I was and you really don't know what you're getting yourself into, there's a whole lot of variables that come into play for the quality of your build. Starting off with the research phase. Are you buying the best value equipment to build with? Like, are you making sure that it's actually going to last? Are you making sure that it has good reviews? Are you making sure it's what you actually need? Then you move on to the building phase. Similar story, of course. Are you soldering proper connections? Are you making sure you aren't being too rough when installing things? Have you missed any components? Then finally, the setup phase. Have you ever used Betaflight before? If you haven't, are you making sure that you're changing every setting necessary, etc, etc, etc? You get the point, right? Every little thing is up to you, and so that means that if something isn't working as it should be, that there's pretty much always going to be on you, unless there is the rare case that something's failed from the manufacturer, but that is very rare. Your build is only going to be as high quality or low quality as every little bit of effort that you put into it from start to finish. So This one all comes down to that factor of skill level and also doing your due diligence with researching beforehand. So far though, both of these sound like they have a bit of work involved in them if you want to choose right, so at the end of the day, what's actually easier for the vast majority of beginners? If you thought I was going to say pre-builds, you're wrong. Well, kinda. I actually think building your own drone is a skill that's required at some point down the road to, be able to complete repairs or even change things up that you don't like. But why does that make it the easier option? You see, with FPV, as much as I wish it could be a bit more straightforward for beginners, it really will always try to throw a curveball at you when you're least expecting it. Take my day-to-day as an example. The plan was simple. Go out for some drone racing training with a few of my mates and have some fun. So of course, packed everything. Went and set up a few gates and then plugged a battery into my DIY race drone. I got the usual startup chime, but no secondary ESC chime, which means something was up. To cut a long story of pulling apart a drone in the back of a car short, the flight controller inside the drone, which is one of the main components, was completely fried and wasn't starting up. Totally random, as it was working before I left the house and then now it wasn't. I've now got a new flight controller on the way. I'll need to install that to get my drone up and flying again. Thankfully, because I built this drone, I actually know how to do everything and I know what I need to do to replace every part. If, however, this had happened to me with a drone I'd bought as a pre-build, man, I'd seriously have no bloomin' idea what to do next. In fact, I wouldn't have had a clue about what had actually stopped working, let alone trying to figure out how to fix it. From that point, you'd then be led down like a rabbit hole of having to learn the skills you need to repair it yourself, and you'd also face the challenge of having no clue what you're working with. Had you built the drone from the ground up though, yes, it would still be a pain, but at the very least, you know what you need to do to fix it, and you'll most likely have an understanding of how to do so. In saying all of that though, don't let yourself be put off pre-builds so quickly. For beginners, pre-built FPV drones are something that I highly lean into and recommend on the daily. If they're such a pain in the butt to fix, then why on earth am I such an advocate for them, you might be thinking? Well, when I was getting started, the thought of having to build my own drone actually repelled me, like genuinely repelled me. I really didn't want to invest the time nor the money into the tools and skills needed to build. So I started off simply with a pre-built kit, which made things literally as easy as possible and got me flying in little to no time. Things certainly went wrong along the way, and I had plenty of challenges that highly probably could have been avoided if I had understood what I was working with. But at the end of the day, without pre-built FPV drones, I wouldn't be a part of this amazing hobby, sharing my experiences here with you guys. Speaking of which, every 14 days I actually share exclusive tips, challenges, and solutions with over 100 other beginner FPV drone pilots in my email newsletter. Everything that I send out is all stuff that I wish I'd known earlier in my FPV journey, so if you want to sign up and become a better drone pilot in just 5 minutes a fortnight, it's totally free. There's a link down in the description box below. So you might be beginning to wonder, what's actually the best option to take? Look, for me, getting started was overwhelming as hell and super daunting. All I wanted to do was fly a drone down a waterfall and do the cool tricks and stuff that I'd seen on Instagram. I already knew that there was a massive learning curve for actually flying the drone, and that was a big enough task to think about having to do, let alone the thought of trying to find what parts and equipment I needed to go buy, and then figuring out how the heck it all goes together. And so that's exactly why I chose to go the pre-built route, and I'm sure there are a few of you who might be feeling similar to me. However, if that's not the case, and you're a keen tinkerer, then by all means building a drone is going to be one of the most rewarding and challenging things for you to do. I can't even explain how amazing it felt when I built my first FPV drone and then took it outside for its first flight. I was just standing there, so stoked with myself, and just so happy that somehow I'd made something that actually flies. That's just not a feeling that you can get with pre-builds. So if you figured that building a drone to get started on this hobby is the best option for you, then I've made a complete walkthrough video simply explaining all the details and actually building a drone in real time with you. That video is here. However, if you feel similar to how I used to and think it's all going to be too overwhelming to start with a build, then no worries, I've taken the guesswork out of things and I've got a few good pre-built recommendations that I've researched, tried, and tested. One of them is right here. We'll catch you soon.